retired U.S. Army four-star general, Fox News senior strategic analyst. We welcome to the show General Jack Keane. It's great to have you on, sir. Your reaction to this reporting and what's going on with the Russian oil embargo?
Well, first of all, we'll give the president some credit for imposing that on Russia. Certainly, I think it's certainly a moral imperative. We know full well the Russians can make up that oil if they want to with China, but nonetheless, we can't be paying Russia for that oil. It makes no sense whatsoever. I also think Liz, the idea that we're going to talk to the Venezuelans, who are Russia's ally. Russia sent the Wagner Group in there to prop up Maduro when it looked like the regime was going to fall, and they treat them as a close communist ally. And the thought that we would go to the Iranians, you know, who have killed countless numbers of Americans in the Middle East, destabilized the Middle East, are in pursuit of a nuclear weapon, and we are sanctioning their oil and repressing it as we are with Venezuela. I mean, that is so reckless and irresponsible. Even to bring it up as an option is not even worthy of discussion, much less go out and think seriously about executing it.
Yeah, the other thing, too, is what if the Russian oil embargo doesn't work and Putin keeps going? We should be turning on our oil and natural gas hydrants like never before. And the question is, that would undercut Putin even more than a Russian oil embargo. But instead, the focus is only on a Russian oil embargo and not U.S. energy.
Well, I don't think the Russian embargo is going to work overall, because the Europeans are not going to participate. I mean, the Germans already told that. Certainly, I believe the president is likely strong-arming some of the European leaders here to get them involved in it, despite the hardship it may cause to their own people. I mean, there's considerable hardship going on in Ukraine, and certainly everyone's concerned about the war being expanded. So I think asking the European people to make a sacrifice, given what the stakes are out there, is certainly something that should be happening. That has to come from their own leaders, of course.
And but
I do think the door will not close on Russia's oil and gas being exported. It's good the United States has stepped up. Hopefully others will.
Well, they may not. I mean, Russia's threatening to shut off energy into Europe right now. A year ago, who could have imagined $7 a gallon in gas prices? We had energy independence, low inflation, rising wages, even for blue-collar workers, rising number of jobs, rising consumer confidence. So all that is going on. I mean, so when you see what is going on in the markets, by the way, the vice president was taking questions and just shrugged off, avoided any questions about what was happening with the Russian oil embargo. I mean, Poland is talking fighter jets sent into Ukraine. Zelensky is no longer interested in NATO, and China is buying Russia's oil instead. So your point is well taken, General, that, there's countervailing forces besides what's going on with the Russian oil embargo as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're trying to work the sanctions pretty hard. I mean, there's some things, there's carve-outs. Obviously, not all the banks are involved. And there's carve-outs for them in the SWIFT system. I think there's about 20% of those banks that are not participating. And certainly, it looks like we're not going to shut down Russia's oil and gas industry. So there's still going to be some loopholes here for Russia, to be sure. But nonetheless, what's also vitally important is the NATO nations have stepped up along with the United States. They recognize there's a real threat in Europe here. It's kind of like a jolt to them. And we've got to put real military capability into Eastern Europe. We're beginning to do that now. And we've got to continue to supply the arms and munitions to Zelensky and the Ukrainians. This thing is going to go on for some time, and he's going to need those weapon systems to continue to have the success that they haven't enjoyed so far. I mean, it's absolutely laudable that they have stopped this military and in their northern campaign, and they've only had very modest gains in their southern campaign. It is stunning that they've been able to achieve this degree of success. And we've got to give them as much as we possibly can to continue that success.
The world is moving also to stop Russia from using its gold. London bullion market is effectively blocking 6 Russian precious metal refiners from Russia selling gold and silver on the world's largest market. We've got a group of U.S. senators, a bipartisan group, introducing a bill to stop Russia from liquidating gold to get around crippling sanctions. We just want to get a feel and show the viewer what's going on in Ukraine. We have Russian soldiers accused of drunkenly shooting at villages and more. Let's take a listen to what's going on in Ukraine. Watch.
Unfortunately, the Russians attacked and they came to our city. They damaged our infrastructure and killed innocent. So now we are blocked in the city. We can't go anywhere. They are not even passing all cars with the products, medicine. So here we are waiting, and just this is our life now.
Let me remind the Russian diplomats that in London, in case of need for mental help, you can dial NHS line 111.
That was the Ukrainian ambassador telling Russian diplomats lying about the war they need mental help. Russia, how does this end? I mean, are they talking now? They're talking basically no NATO or EU membership for the Ukraine, and that Ukraine needs to recognize Crimea as a Russian territory. Is that going to stop Putin? General, your final word.
Well, first of all, Zelensky's not going to let them have Crimea and the 2 breakaway republics and recognize those as being part of Russia. That's just not going to happen. Zelensky's always had his own choice about when they want to go into NATO and when NATO's ready to accept them. There's no position in NATO right now for bringing Ukraine into NATO, regardless of what is going on with Russia. How does this end? The truth is, we just don't know.
Okay.
The fact is, there's a lot of fighting that's going to take place in front of us, and hopefully there's some kind of off-ramp here for the Russians where they can save some face and also make it a political accommodation with Zelensky that makes some sense.
General Keane, thanks for joining us. It's good to see you. Okay.